Breaking news. Chaos is erupting inside the United Auto Workers Union. What was supposed to be a historic victory for American auto workers has turned into a full-blown mutiny. The new contract, hailed just weeks ago as the best in decades, is now being ripped apart by the very workers it was meant to protect. Plants across Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois are buzzing with anger, with workers accusing UAW leadership of selling them out. Instead of celebrating, they're fuming, claiming the deal locks in unfair wage tiers, weakens job security, and hands automakers a backdoor to slash benefits in the future. Insiders are describing the mood on the factory floor as explosive. Some workers are already talking about mass resignation from the union. Others are calling for emergency votes to oust top leaders. The core complaint? While the headlines promised huge pay raises, the fine print tells a different story. One where inflation will eat away at those gains. Temporary workers remain trapped in low-pay limbo, and automation loopholes threaten thousands of jobs. Even retirees, once a guaranteed source of UAW loyalty, are furious, claiming the contract leaves their healthcare coverage more vulnerable than ever. Behind the scenes, tensions between rank-and-file members and union executives have been building for years. Many workers see this contract as proof that leadership has grown too cozy with Detroit's big three automakers. They point to the fact that company stock prices soared immediately after the deal was announced, a clear sign, according to critics, that automakers, not workers, are the real winners. And it's not just a financial betrayal. For many, it's personal. Generations of workers fought, struck, and sacrificed for the UAW's reputation as a relentless defender of the working class. Now, some say that legacy is being buried under corporate-friendly compromises. To make matters worse, whispers are spreading that this contract could be the opening act of something bigger, a long-term corporate strategy to weaken unions across the entire American manufacturing sector. Some labor experts warn that if the UAW buckles here, other unions in steel, aerospace, and shipping could face similar sweet-sounding deals that quietly undermine worker power. This is why the anger isn't staying contained. Protest banners are already appearing outside plants. Social media groups are exploding with calls for new strikes, despite leadership urging patience. And the split between members and the union's top brass is widening by the day, threatening not just the contract, but the very survival of the UAW as a unified force. It didn't happen overnight. The seeds of this collapse were planted years ago, during a wave of corruption scandals that saw several high-ranking UAW officials hauled into court. Those trials shook members' faith in the very people they trusted to negotiate their livelihoods. And while leadership promised a new era of transparency, workers say this latest contract proves nothing has changed, except now, the betrayals are dressed up in glossy press releases. In private meetings, some union reps allegedly brushed off member concerns, insisting that this is the best deal we're going to get, and warning that pushing back could cost jobs entirely. To the workers, that sounded less like negotiation and more like surrender. On the shop floors, the sense of betrayal is raw. Veteran assembly line workers, some with 20 or 30 years under their belts, are openly saying they've never seen morale this low. Younger hires, already disillusioned by years of being stuck in lower-tier pay brackets, are now questioning whether joining the union was worth it at all. The UAW was once a badge of honor, a shield against corporate exploitation. Today, in the eyes of many, it's becoming a symbol of compromise and decline. The anger is so widespread that even local union presidents are breaking ranks, speaking out against the deal and openly challenging the national leadership's authority. Meanwhile, Detroit's automakers are staying quiet in public, but behind closed doors, they're celebrating. Every dollar saved through wage caps, every loophole preserved for future automation, is a win for shareholders. Executives know that if the UAW fractures, their leverage in future labor talks will skyrocket. Already, analysts on Wall Street are predicting smoother negotiations in coming years, code for "we can push for more without as much resistance." For workers, this feels like watching the walls close in, because once the precedent is set, clawing back lost ground is almost impossible. And then there's the elephant in the room, automation. Hidden deep within the contract's language are clauses that allow companies to fast-track new robotics and AI-driven assembly systems with minimal oversight from the union. To many workers, this is a direct threat to their jobs, disguised as modernization. They fear that within a decade, thousands of positions will vanish, and the union will be powerless to stop it, because they've already signed away that fight. The betrayal isn't just about money. It's about survival, about whether the next generation of auto workers will even have a place in this industry. That's why the frustration is turning into something more dangerous for UAW leadership organization. Across the Midwest, small but determined groups of workers are forming independent committees, bypassing official union channels to strategize their next move. Some are calling for a wildcat strike, an unsanctioned walkout that could bring production to a halt without leadership's approval. Others are talking about decertifying the UAW entirely and forming a new labor organization from scratch, one they believe will actually fight for them instead of cutting deals behind closed doors. Social media is fueling this rebellion at lightning speed. Private Facebook groups, encrypted messaging apps, and TikTok videos filmed right on the factory floor are spreading raw, unfiltered messages of defiance. Workers are posting photos of the contract's fine print, highlighting clauses they say the union intentionally glossed over. Videos of angry plant meetings are going viral, racking up hundreds of thousands of views and rallying support from other industries. This isn't just an internal union squabble anymore. It's turning into a national labor flashpoint. And it's not just current workers who are joining the fight. Retirees, once considered the UAW's most loyal base, are stepping back into the fray. Many of them remember strikes that lasted for months, battles that secured the wages and benefits that younger workers now enjoy. To see those hard-fought gains traded away feels like a personal insult. Retirees are showing up at rallies, writing open letters, and urging active members not to accept this poison pill contract. Their message is blunt. If you give in now, you'll regret it for the rest of your careers. In the middle of all this, the national UAW leadership is scrambling to control the narrative. Press conferences are being called, talking points are being distributed, and local reps are being instructed to correct misinformation on the shop floor. But every attempt at damage control seems to backfire, because for many workers, the problem isn't misinformation. The problem is that they believe the information is accurate, and it's damning. Trust is a currency the leadership no longer has, and once it's gone, it's almost impossible to get back. And now, the political pressure is starting to mount. Lawmakers who once proudly stood alongside the UAW during strikes are suddenly going quiet, unwilling to be seen endorsing a deal that so many workers despise. A few are even publicly questioning whether the union is still acting in the best interest of its members. This is uncharted territory because for decades, the UAW's political influence was considered untouchable. If that shield starts to crack, the union could lose one of its most powerful bargaining tools in Washington. Meanwhile, the automakers are carefully watching this implosion, timing their next moves with surgical precision. Industry insiders are already whispering about plans to shift more production to non-union plants in the South or even overseas, citing labor stability as the reason. If that happens, the very workers who are fighting for better pay and job security could end up facing massive layoffs, not because of their performance, but because their own union has lost its grip on the industry. Inside the plants, the tension is now palpable. Conversations on the assembly line have shifted from weekend plans and sports scores to whispers about contingency plans. What to do if the union won't fight? What to do if the jobs start disappearing? What to do if the collapse becomes permanent? Union halls that were once filled with camaraderie and solidarity are now arenas for shouting matches. Members are demanding emergency meetings, and in some cases, physically confronting local reps for answers they can't or won't give. But perhaps the most dangerous development for the UAW leadership is the growing realization among members that they hold more power than they've been led to believe. When workers begin to understand that their labor is the real engine of the auto industry, the fear of retaliation starts to fade. And when fear disappears, so does obedience. That's the point where movements stop asking for change and start taking it. The first real sign of that shift came earlier this week, when a group of workers at a major Michigan assembly plant staged an unannounced 2-hour work stoppage. No warning, no official vote, just a coordinated slowdown that brought an entire production line to a crawl. Management scrambled to get operations moving again, but the message was crystal clear. The workers are no longer waiting for permission from union leadership to flex their power. Word of the incident spread like wildfire, and by the next day, similar slowdowns were being reported in Ohio and Indiana. This kind of defiance terrifies both the automakers and the UAW brass. For the companies, it means unpredictable disruptions that can ripple through the supply chain in days. For the union leadership, it's even worse. It's proof that members are willing to take matters into their own hands, bypassing the very structure that's supposed to control and coordinate their actions. If wildcat actions continue to spread, the leadership's authority could disintegrate entirely, leaving them powerless to rein in the unrest. At the same time, a new wave of independent labor voices is emerging. Influential workers, some with decades on the line, others barely a few years in, are becoming unofficial spokespersons for the movement. They're posting daily updates, sharing insider info, and rallying others under hashtags calling for a real union and no more sellouts. These voices aren't just venting. They're organizing, collecting contacts, drafting proposals, and talking openly about a post-UAW future. It's becoming clear that the anger is no longer just reactive. It's evolving into a proactive plan to rebuild labor representation from the ground up. And as this momentum builds, it's drawing national attention. Independent journalists, labor historians, and even rival unions are starting to take notice. Some see this as the first real test of whether American workers can break free from entrenched union leadership and create something more democratic. Others warn that without structure, the movement could implode before it ever gains lasting traction. Either way, the fight has entered a new phase, one where the stakes are no longer just about a bad contract, but about the very future of organized labor in the U.S. auto industry. The pressure is now spilling beyond the factory gates. Families of auto workers, spouses, children, even parents, are joining in, speaking out at community meetings and local news interviews. They're pointing out that this isn't just about union politics. It's about livelihoods, mortgages, college tuition, and the stability of entire towns built around these plants. When a union collapses in a small industrial city, it's not just the workers who suffer. It's the diners, the hardware stores, the schools, and the neighborhoods that depend on steady paychecks flowing through the local economy. Small business owners are starting to weigh in too. Some of them remember the strikes of decades past, when they rallied behind workers because they knew that a win for the union meant more money circulating in their communities. But now, many are worried. If this contract dispute spirals into plant closures or mass layoffs, the ripple effect could wipe out their customer base. This is why the battle over the UAW's future isn't just a labor dispute. It's becoming a full-blown economic crisis in the making. And all the while, cracks inside the leadership are starting to show. Leaked emails and meeting notes suggest that not all national officers supported the contract from the start. Some reportedly warned that the wage increases wouldn't keep up with inflation and that the automation clauses could be catastrophic. But those concerns were allegedly brushed aside in the rush to secure a deal that could be sold as a political win. Now, with the backlash reaching a boiling point, those same officers are quietly distancing themselves, hoping to avoid being swept out if the rank and file force a leadership purge. Meanwhile, the automakers are staying calculated and patient. They know that chaos inside the union is their greatest advantage. Every day the workers spend fighting each other instead of the company is another day management wins. Corporate PR teams are carefully framing the situation as a misunderstanding or internal union matter, avoiding public confrontation while their lawyers and strategists quietly prepare for the next round of concessions they'll try to extract once the dust settles. But on the ground, that dust isn't settling, it's thickening. Rallies outside major plants are drawing bigger crowds by the week, with homemade signs accusing the UAW of being bought and paid for and corporate's best friend. Chants that once targeted CEOs are now aimed directly at union leadership, a stunning reversal that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Local police have even been called in to monitor gatherings, not because they've turned violent, but because the turnout is spilling into streets and disrupting traffic around factory entrances. Some members are taking their fight into the legal arena. A handful of lawsuits are being drafted, accusing the union of misrepresenting the terms of the contract and violating its duty to fairly represent members. If those cases gain traction, they could drag leadership into a prolonged court battle, one that would air the union's internal disputes in public and potentially open the books on how negotiations were really handled. That's a nightmare scenario for a leadership already battling an image crisis. At the same time, the alternative labor movement forming in the shadows is becoming bolder. Organizers are holding unofficial meetings in union halls after hours, at local bars, even in people's garages. The tone of these gatherings is shifting from anger to strategy. They're mapping out ways to force a new contract vote, debating bylaws for a possible breakaway union, and discussing how to connect with other industries facing similar battles. What started as outrage is becoming infrastructure, a dangerous sign for those clinging to the old order. And looming over all of this is the clock. The next scheduled contract renegotiations aren't for years, but workers aren't waiting that long. Every day that leadership fails to address the uprising, the more members feel they have nothing to lose by forcing a confrontation now. The whispers of another large-scale strike, this time against both the automakers and their own union, are growing louder. If that happens, the UAW won't just be in crisis, it could be facing extinction. For many on the inside, that word, extinction, no longer sounds like an exaggeration. Veteran members who once defended the UAW at every turn are now openly admitting that the union might not survive another year if it continues down this path. In private conversations, some are saying the unthinkable. Maybe the collapse is necessary. Maybe the only way to save organized labor in the auto industry is to let the old structure burn and rebuild something entirely new from the ashes. This radical thinking is being fueled by a shift in tone among the younger workforce. They're less sentimental about the union's history and far more pragmatic about its future. Many of them grew up hearing about the glory days of the UAW, but have only experienced pay tiers, stagnant wages, and broken promises. To them, the union isn't a sacred institution, it's a tool. And if a tool doesn't work, you replace it. That blunt perspective is catching on fast, especially in plants where workers under 35 make up a growing share of the workforce. Meanwhile, the corporate side is already preparing for both scenarios: a weakened UAW limping forward or a total collapse. Insiders say automakers are drafting contingency plans for rapid plant reorganization, new non-union hiring drives, and expanded use of temporary contractors if the union loses its grip. These plans aren't being hidden. They're being quietly leaked, perhaps intentionally, to sow even more fear and division among the workers. It's psychological warfare, and it's working, but fear can cut both ways. In some plants, it's triggering a kind of last stand mentality. Workers who feel they're already staring down the barrel of job losses are becoming more willing to take risks. They're ignoring union directives, bypassing formal grievance channels, and directly confronting plant managers over unsafe conditions and excessive overtime. In a few cases, workers have simply walked off the job mid-shift, leaving supervisors scrambling to fill the gaps. Every act of defiance sends a signal, not just to management, but to their fellow workers, that the old rules are no longer binding. And that's exactly what terrifies the establishment, because once workers stop following the old rules, they start writing their own. The unrest has reached a tipping point where even a small spark could ignite something massive. One plant slowdown could become a coordinated regional shutdown. One local rally could swell into a national movement. And if that happens, neither the UAW leadership nor the automakers will be able to put the lid back on. In the final days of this escalating crisis, the lines are being drawn sharper than ever. On one side, a leadership clinging to power, insisting that compromise is the only way forward. On the other, a restless and increasingly united rank and file, convinced that compromise is what got them here in the first place. The rhetoric has hardened. No more polite appeals, no more waiting for the next negotiation cycle. The call now is for action, and it's echoing from the assembly lines to the streets. The truth is, the UAW, as it has existed for decades, may already be gone in everything but name. What comes next? Whether it's a reformed union, a breakaway organization, or no union at all, will shape the future of the American auto industry for generations. Entire communities, entire families will feel the impact of what happens in these next few months. The workers know it, the companies know it, and deep down, even the union leadership knows it. One way or another, the fight is here. And when it's over, the industry will never look the same again.